I asked 100 FPL experts for their Game Week 1 drafts, and I combined that data to create the dream expert team for the new season. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan, and I almost can't believe how good this team looks. I cannot wait to share it with you. Okay, so guys, this is a follow-up from yesterday's video, which I definitely recommend you go and look at as well, where we look at all of the data from 100 expert FPL drafts to see what we could learn from that. Which players are being selected a lot? What kind of trends are we seeing in terms of captains and chip usage? If anyone is going for particular teams and maybe ignoring other teams, there's loads of data in that video. So do go check it out after you've watched this video or before if you would prefer to do it that way as well. But today we are building a team using that data, and I've basically looked at a few criteria that we learned from last video to see if we can build something using that criteria, I guess. So here's the criteria, guys. We need to use a 3-4-3 formation. That was the most popular formation among our experts. We need to include both Haaland and Salah. That seems to be the trend. We're going to use one player on the bench that is above the base price. So we're going to put at least a little bit of money on our bench just to give us a little bit of bench cover in case anything goes wrong with our starting 11. We're not going to be using rotating goalkeepers, so our first choice goalkeeper will cost some money. The second choice goalkeeper will be a 4 million goalkeeper who remains on our bench throughout the season, and we're also going to be using as many popular expert picks as possible. I think that's the one that is the most obvious, and we're going to build a team with the 100 million budget using the most popular picks from the experts. Guys, this is a good team. Before we have a look at this team, if you want to become an FPL expert as well, you need to make sure you are subscribed to Fantasy Football Hub. They are running a deal right now where you can get 50% off your membership and you'll get your money back if you don't win your mini league as well. So make sure you sign up using the link in the description. You can get access to their My Team AI rating tool where they suggest transfers to you and help you improve your team with the data that they have available in really, really simple terms. It's so easy for anyone to do. They have excellent tools for looking at fixtures, for comparing players, looking at predicted points of players, looking at those Opta stats for players. So if you're a true FPL nerd and you want to win your mini leagues, well, you need to be involved in tools like this. So check it out now before that deal runs out at the Game Week 1 deadline. Now, let's go see this team. Right, so we have spent all of our budget for this team. We're going to go position by position and talk about the most popular picks. And we're going to start off in goal with Henderson. Now, at just 34% selected by our experts, the goalkeeper position was a little bit contentious. And you'll know that if you've watched yesterday's video already. Henderson was the most popular at 34%. And there does seem to be a strong preference among our experts to choose a 4.5 million goalkeeper. Henderson was the most popular of all of the goalkeepers with some pretty decent fixtures, but also we now know that Henderson is going to be the first choice for Crystal Palace. And that's going to be very, very useful information given that Crystal Palace were among the top defences last season. I think they were around 4th, depending on what sample size you use the whole season, the second half of the season, around 4th best defence in the Premier League when you look at those underlying defensive numbers, which is obviously very, very impressive that you can get a 4.5 million goalkeeper from the 4th best defence in the Premier League. That's really, really good value for money, and it's no doubt that he is so popular among our experts. Going into the defense, the most popular pick was Gavardio, 68% ownership, so a little bit higher than the goalkeeper's position. I think people maybe understood more who they were going for in defense. I think there was more of a consensus. More of our experts were agreeing on who the best defenders were, and Gavardio was the #1 guy. Opening game against Chelsea, which is tough for a defender, but after that, we have fixtures like Ipswich, West Ham, and Brentford, which could provide some real good value for a Gavardio who is capable of playing advanced in that left-back position, pushing on and maybe getting a couple of goals and assists. You look at that Ipswich fixture, for example, add clean sheets to attacking returns, it could be huge, and 6 million could look like a really good price tag for him. Our next defender is Trent Alexander-Arnold, the 7 million man with phenomenal fixtures, as we know, with Liverpool. 46% selected is a little bit lower, so just under half of our experts were picking him, but that's enough of a trend to justify putting him in this team. And it's actually quite impressive that as I mentioned kind of before, This is a team that includes both Salah and Haaland, and yet we've also managed to fit in Gavardio and Trent Alexander-Arnold, which previously I didn't really think it was possible to build a super strong team and include, the two big premium players and also have these strong defenders in your team as well. But it's totally possible, as it turns out, and the experts enlightened me to this information. Our final defender is going to be Mykolenko, 4.5 million. So we do have to go for some slightly cheaper guys somewhere in order to fit both Salah and Haaland in. So Mykolenko is in this team. Pretty decent fixtures against Brighton and Bournemouth, with some tough ones around that against Spurs and Aston Villa. But thankfully, our experts have already thought about this one, and they've got a player on the bench ready to go who is going to be able to cover us for those tough fixtures. And you can rotate Mykolenko out for a bench defender, or actually a couple of different bench defenders that work quite well during those game weeks where Mykolenko has the difficult fixtures. 37% selection for Mykolenko, so he was in over a third of expert teams as well. Pretty high indeed. Let's move on into the midfield next, and we have got Mo Salah, of course, as you know. 12.5 million, very expensive, but phenomenal fixtures and a real good captain opportunity throughout the opening part of the season. These opening games for Liverpool are just so fantastic, and I think a lot of people would be very worried to go without Salah. Now, I'm in my personal team right now. I don't have Salah, but I definitely recognise that he is an amazing pick, and he's going to do really, really well during this great run of fixtures. Even if maybe Palmer's and Saka's in your team, maybe they can compete with Salah over the course of the whole season, but during this opening run, when you got that captain option as well, I think he's going to be a really, really useful player for anyone who manages to fit him into their team. And guys, by the way, make sure you have dropped a like on this video. We are shooting again for 2,000 likes on this video. I know you guys can do it, so yeah, please help me out here. A lot of work has gone into today's video and yesterday's video, and I just hope you guys appreciate it and find it useful, I suppose. Do subscribe, of course, if you want to follow along with the experts team every week as well. If you want to just follow along, see what the experts are doing each week, seeing how this team progresses throughout the season, make sure you are subscribed and you will have that in your YouTube feed. But we've got to put some more players on the pitch. Now, continuing the trend of putting in players first who are the highest of ownerships, well, that puts Nkunku in next, because just like Salah, he is 70% selected among experts. So two really, really popular players, strong trends among our experts, leading us towards these players. So it seems pretty obvious to go for these two, I think, as a basis for your FPL team. Certainly, the opening fixture against Man City is not ideal, but remember, Man City will be lacking Rodri, Stones, and Walker potentially for game week 1, which could present some opportunities for Nkunku to do the business. We know what he's capable of. We've seen him in pre-season looking pretty good, can play a variety of positions, and I think he is going to be a strong player throughout the season as long as he can remain injury-free. And certainly for the start of the season, with that full pre-season behind him, he's going to start off the season injury-free indeed. Eberechi Eze is our next pick, and he is a player who is at 69% owned among experts. So again, super high, over 2/3 of experts going for Salah's and Nkunku's Eze's in their team. In fact, most of our experts are going to have at least 2 of these 3 midfielders, so maybe that suggests to me that I should have at least 2 of these midfielders as well. And in my own team, I do. Kind of following the expert advice, which is often a very good idea. But Eze, as a dominator of set pieces, penalties, the star man in a Crystal Palace team with some decent fixtures, particularly from an attacking point of view, where I think Eze can thrive and Crystal Palace can thrive indeed. So that's why he makes this team. And our final midfielder has to be a cheap guy, unfortunately, because we're spending a lot of money on the premium players. And it's going to be Smith Rowe, 5.5 million, 26% selected. And I think this is one of those positions in this team where you don't have to go for Smith Rowe. It's not unanimous among experts that Smith Rowe is the best player for your FPL team, but 26% selection for a 5.5 million midfielder is quite a lot. We don't usually see the cheaper guys being so heavily selected. It's usually more the premium, more expensive guys that we see more of a consensus on. So it's really interesting to see Smith Rowe here. Obviously playing as an attacking midfielder in this Fulham setup, and a really good pre-season, scoring 2 goals in 2 matches. Really, really impressive. And it seems like he is so ready to go, wants to be a game breaker in the Premier League and in FPL this year as well. So really, really nice pick to go for and a great value for money at 5.5. It's nice to see our experts at least agreeing somewhat, 26% of them agree that this is a guy to go for at 5.5 million. Up front, we have got Isak, and Isak is by far the most popular player among experts. 96% of the top FPL managers are selecting Isak for their Game Week 1 team. And for me, that tells me that he is essential. Now, I think there's arguments to be made about all of the other players in this team. Is Salah too expensive? Is Nkunku injury risk? Is Gvardiol or Trent maybe a little bit too expensive for their position? But when it comes to Isak, it is just a non-negotiable. It's non-debatable. And I don't like to tell people what to do in my videos, but I would strongly recommend that if you don't have Isak in your team right now, that you correct that, because 96% of experts is no joke. That is serious. We've got a great opening fixture against Southampton where he's going to be on penalties as well, lining up as that central striker. Real big opportunity for a player who did very well against newly promoted teams last season as well. A bit of a flat track bully in these Premier League games. So I really recommend this player. I really, really do. Our next player is, of course, going to be Haaland, coming in at 73% selected among experts. So that actually makes Haaland the second most popular pick among FPL experts for Game Week 1, which is quite interesting. Just about nudging out Salah there as well. Salah 70%, Haaland 73%. So it's super close, so I wouldn't read into it too much. But if you need some kind of coin toss to decide who to pick, Salah or Haaland, well, technically, among the data that I personally collected, Haaland came out slightly in front. But if I was to do the same data collection again, using a different set of 100 experts, I'm sure we might see Salah, for example, go slightly ahead of Haaland because it is so close. So don't read into it too much, but there you go. Chelsea's going to be a decent fixture. They've been struggling defensively in pre-season under the new manager, Maresca. Second game week is Ipswich, followed by West Ham and Brentford. So some real nice captain opportunities for Haaland, particularly game week 2 against Ipswich. So that's why it's quite nice to have both Salah and Haaland, because you find yourself covered. You don't have to deal with the FOMO of missing out on these big players against Ipswich, because it seems like Ipswich, they've been kind of identified as early whipping boys of this season, of the Premier League season. Can they prove everyone wrong? I don't know. I guess that remains to be seen. And that leaves just one spot left in the starting 11, and it's going to go to Rodrigo Muniz. Now, Muniz is 28% selected among experts, which is reasonably high. That's definitely a strong trend. It's not unanimous again, but it is enough to justify throwing him in this team at 6 million. The other forward that was really popular was actually Solanke at Spurs, who is also 28% selected. But because of budget reasons, we've gone for Muniz, even though they were the same percent selected. So definitely a good way of getting Salah and Haaland into your team is to go for players like Smith Rowe and Muniz for their excellent run of fixtures during this opening stage of the season. So really, really like this combo. If you want to double up on Smith Rowe and Muniz, I think it's okay to do that. If you look at each individual player individually, then you will recognize that both of them have potential. But if you are a little bit worried about overcommitting to Fulham, that's okay too. There are a few other options, and you can find all about them in yesterday's video, where we go through all of the options that our experts are picking. We can see a few more 5.5 million midfielders in that video that you might want to go for. There's other cheap forwards as well in that video that you can kind of switch out if you want to. Let's go to the bench next, guys. And we've got, first of all, the goalkeeper, whose name I absolutely hate saying, Valdemarsson. I think I'm saying it right, Valdemarsson. He is a backup goalkeeper for Brentford. And I think the general idea here is that if Flecken ever gets injured or, falls out of form, then maybe Valdemarsson gets the opportunity to come in and start some games. He's been recently brought in for Brentford. He is an Icelandic international goalkeeper, which is pretty impressive, I suppose. An international goalkeeper there, coming in as a backup. But yeah, I think that's the general idea. People may be doubting Flecken a little bit, and maybe Valdemarsson can come in and do the business. Really interesting, very low ownership among the overall player base, but our experts really seem to like him as that backup goalkeeper of choice. Next up, we've got Barco, 68% selected and often placed on the bench. among our experts from the drafts that I was looking at. I'm not sure if he's a player you'd want to start every game week, but he can certainly deputise. And if he starts the season well, he could be another one of those game-breaking players at just 4 million. We've also got Robinson, who is a 4.5 million defender, and he represents the money on the bench in this team. And you can rotate him with Mykolenko. And what we saw with our expert drafts is, once again, Robinson was on the bench for a lot of these drafts. And I think the idea is to rotate him with an Anderson or a Mykolenko, as you can see, a Munoz, someone else, someone who maybe has certain fixtures or game weeks where the fixture doesn't look great. Robinson can come in game week 2, where he plays against Leicester, where Mykolenko is playing away to Spurs. And in game week 4, Robinson plays against West Ham and Mykolenko plays away against Aston Villa. So you can swap them around for each game week, depending on who has the better fixture. And maybe Barco can come in and be involved in that as well. You know, home against Ipswich in game week 4 could be pretty useful if you wanted to play him there instead of Mykolenko or Robinson, assuming that Barco retains his place in that Brighton team. And our final pick is going to be Harry Winks. So he was just the most popular 4.5 million midfielder. There was a couple of other cheap midfielders that a few of our experts were picking as well. For example, Rodgers. We saw a little bit of ownership for Rodgers. However, Winks did have more ownership among our experts, and therefore he makes the cut for this team, going super cheap on that, I guess, fourth bench option that just remains on the bench. In terms of captaincy, the most popular captain at 50% was Salah. So he's going to get the captain's armband for this team. And the vice captain is going to go to Isak. He's the second most popular captain among our experts. Of course, again, check out yesterday's video if you want a full breakdown on the most popular captains for game week 1. But looking through this team, I think it is very, very strong. There are some interesting notes, and the most interesting note for me is it has triple Fulham in it. And I don't know if I like the idea of having triple Fulham, but when I try and think about it logically and look at each Fulham player individually, I quite like that. I quite like each player individually. I don't think there's anything wrong with any of those players. Another thing to note, if you are taking inspiration for this from this team, if you want to just use this team, I say go for it. I think it looks really strong. But certainly, if you did want to make any tweaks to it, the tweaks I would make would probably be among those players who are slightly lower owned among the experts. So Henderson, Mykolenko, Smith Rowe, Muniz, and of course those bench players. I think those are the kind of players that you can maybe switch out for someone who you prefer a little bit more and make some little changes here and there as well. Maybe Trent could be removed as well at 46% ownership. But all of the players we see at kind of 70% and above, Salah, Nkunku, Isak, Haaland, there is strong indication that these are great picks to go for. And my final observation was, because this season, the data was quite diverse. I think in previous seasons, it's been so easy to build an FPL team that our experts kind of get to this very template team that everyone seems to be super similar. But I think this season, there's a variety of ways of playing FPL and a variety of different players that look good. So it creates a lot of different combinations that look really nice. So I think you can afford this season to be a bit more creative, to go against the grain a little bit more, because quite simply, there are more good options to go for. And that was really reflected in yesterday's video. So there were a few players that didn't quite make the cut for the expert team, despite the fact that a lot of our experts do quite like these players. The main one was Pedro Porro, and that really was a budget issue, really. And there were a couple of other defenders that our experts really liked as well. So when I was trying to cut the budget in order to afford, the big guys that are really super popular, Haaland, Salah, Isak, to have these players in your team, someone had to be sacrificed, and Pedro Porro was the guy. He had to downgrade to a Mykolenko, who was also, but in fairness, Mykolenko very, very popular at 37%. So it's not too much of a difference there, but that's why Pedro Porro didn't make the final team despite his high ownership among experts. It was just a budget thing, but still a very good option to go for. Among the other players, none of them really stand out as players who absolutely should be in the expert team, given that their selection numbers were not super high. We've got Gordon at 35%. That was another budget decision. Otherwise, he would go in instead of Smith Rowe, but obviously the budget doesn't allow for that. Flecken, Henderson is just higher owned than Flecken, so he was never going to make the cut. Can't really afford to have Saka if you want Haaland and a Salah in your team. Solanke, obviously we spoke about him already, and everyone else, Harwood Bellis, Rodgers, Munoz, Raya, Anderson, these kind of players, yes, they're pretty popular among experts, but they're not as popular as the players who actually did make the final team that we made today. So those are some of the players that missed out, and I just wanted to explain why they were missed out, just in case you were looking and expecting certain players in the final team. And before we wrap up, guys, I do simply have to show you this, because this is the Fantasy Football Hub's My Team tool, which is really useful for getting a second opinion of your team, getting instantly rated to see how it stacks up. Do the numbers back up your selections? And what I found when I entered the expert team into Fantasy Football Hub, well, I simply used a screenshot and uploaded it to the Fantasy Football Hub app, and then had a look at the website here to get a nice big screen view of it. I found we have a 97% rated team. That is really high, particularly for a Salah and Haaland team, because what we often find is that teams with both Salah and Haaland, they're a little bit more difficult to balance and create a team where everyone looks good and everyone is capable of scoring decent FPL points. But this is, one of the best in terms of the numbers and the analytics backing up the team. This is pretty much one of the best Haaland and Salah teams that you can possibly make. And we just coincidentally managed to create it using data from our experts. So it really does show that they do know what they're talking about, because they've managed to create this 97% selected, rated team. Guys, I definitely should say that if you want to get your team rated, go and do it now. You can do it for free using the second link in the description. Of course, if you sign up for a full membership of Fantasy Football Hub, you'll be able to get, transfer suggestions. You'll be able to show how you can improve your team, see which players you should play each game week. So it kind of makes those suggestions of, if you should play Robinson certain game weeks, or if you've got Rodgers on your bench, which weeks you should play him and who you should be benching in order to, sacrifice one of your players in your starting 11. Super useful for that. So do go check it out, guys, using the link in the description. But I'm impressed by this 97% team. I really, really am. And I'm curious to see if any of you guys can do any better than that for a Salah and Haaland team. I don't know. Can you do it? I think a lot of the higher rated teams I've seen have one or the other and not both. But there we go. But guys, we're going to leave it there. Like I say, check out Fantasy Football Hub. Check out yesterday's video if you haven't done already, because I think it really does complement the video that you've seen today and give a bit more kind of, I guess, context behind a lot of the things we spoke about today. But make sure you guys drop a like. Do subscribe if you haven't done already. We've got a banger video coming out tomorrow, which you'll find out if you're subscribed to the channel about this video. But you're going to like it, trust me. But I'll see you tomorrow for that video, and I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.